Greetings to the academic event organizers, to my fellow paper presenters, delegates, and participants. I am Dr. Galahad Randall Unciano, a Filipino and an independent research specialist and consultant of the Gichueri Research Consultancy in Social Sciences with its research laboratory located in Urdaneta City, Pangasinan, Philippines. I am thankful for this opportunity to present to this august academic body my recently completed study. This is an online public presentation of my study entitled Philosophico-Ethical Analysis of a Morally Proscriptive Gender Pastoral Model, Undertones of Ethical Pessimism in the Catholic Pastoral Approach to LGBT Persons. This research is an extension study of my previous research entitled Undertones of Pessimistic Existentialism in the Conceptualization of Homosexuality, a critical analysis of the 1986 Catholic pastoral letter, Homosexualitatis Problema, that I completed in July 2025. The current extension study was completed this September 2025. In view of the House guidelines on the limited time allocated for my presentation, I can only provide a general overview of my study. I will now proceed to the details of my research. There is a growing number of people who openly identify as LGBT in many parts of the world. A trend driven by increased social acceptance, greater visibility, and the empowerment of younger generations. A May 2024 survey by Statista Consumer Insights found that approximately 7% of adults identify as LGBT. This comprises around 5.8 million from the world's total population. The proportion of people identifying as LGBT is increasing with each generation. The Philippines, the United States, and Israel had the highest share of adults identifying as LGBT. Despite advances in the social emancipation of LGBT people, many major churches and denominations continue to hold theological positions that reject same-sex marriage, homosexual acts, and gender transitions. While some religious leaders have expressed more accepting views, some churches still promote harmful conversion therapy or change and suppression practices that seek to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity through spiritual or psychological interventions. These practices are widely condemned by major medical and mental health organizations. Major denominations like the Roman Catholic Church officially condemns same-sex sexual acts. The Catholic Church, among other conservative evangelical and Orthodox churches, continue to oppose LGBT relationships based on traditional interpretations of the Bible. The Catholic Church teaches that homosexual persons should be treated with respect, but that their homosexual activities are objectively disordered and against divine and natural law. In 1986, homosexuality has become a subject of increasing public and even internal Catholic discussions. The rising influence of groups and clergy advocating for gay acceptance within the church and society created the need for a clear statement from the church magisterium. This prompted the Catholic Church, through the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, to issue the Catholic pastoral letter entitled On the Pastoral Care of Homosexual Persons. This pastoral letter aimed to remove ambiguity and provide instructions for bishops to counter these emerging perspectives. The pastoral letter provided instructions to bishops and clergy on how to offer pastoral care to gay and lesbian people. It stressed that while homosexual persons must be treated with respect and charity, and that violence against LGBT is condemned, all Catholics, including homosexuals, are called to live a chaste life. To this present day, the 1986 letter on the pastoral care of the homosexual persons remains one of the most influential documents on Catholic teaching on homosexuality. Its teachings had a profound and lasting impact on how the Church addressed this issue. though it also caused significant controversy and pain for many LGBT Catholics and their allies. For decades now, the letter still provides the foundational framework for the Church's approach to pastoral care for LGBT individuals and shaped the official understanding of homosexuality. For the theoretical and practical significance of my study, I must say that research on homosexuality serves as a critical, often challenging voice to the Church, urging a reconsideration of harsh doctrinal teachings on the topic, particularly from a human dignity and evolving scientific perspective that contrasts with traditional interpretation of scriptures. I actually conceptualized this study with my aim to contribute by giving a voice to those who feel excluded, marginalized, condemned, or pressured by religious institutions. Using philosophical investigation, my study hopes to serve as an essential catalyst for internal dialogue, especially in the Catholic Church, encouraging a necessary re-examination and refinement of its doctrinal positions on homosexuality and its pastoral approach to homosexuals. The current slide shows the intersection of sustainable development goals in the framework of my study that signifies it to SDG number 5 on gender equality, SDG number 10 on reduced inequalities, and SDG number 3 on good health and well-being, specifically focused on the mental health and well-being of LGBT persons. The full paper of this study, published in ResearchGate, indicates a total of 70 citations of related literature that were accessed online. Some literature digests were devoted to understanding the key concepts and theories in my study. Thematically, the readings were accessed to gain insights on the following topics as shown in these slides. For my research objective, my study advanced the thesis that a proscriptive moral framework informs the Catholic gender pastoral approach. Arguments in defense of this thesis were based on the results of philosophical analysis that deconstructed the conceptual definition of homosexuality offered by a 1986 Catholic pastoral letter, which was treated as the source text. The underlying moral imperatives that inform the Catholic approach to gender pastoral care were also explicated from the source text. Using ethical analysis, the study drew further implications of ethical pessimism from the thesis asserted. The chronological order of philosophical investigations in my study is guided by a series of research questions. My study advanced 4 specific research questions that it aimed to answer. These research questions are shown on the screen. The conceptual paradigm flashed on the screen illustrates this study's customized philosophical investigative model for theoretically deconstructing the Catholic gender pastoral framework. My research registers as a philosophical study utilizing qualitative research design, which is usually adopted in philosophical studies. Textual analysis were used in the context of a philosophical method. Textual analysis was specifically deployed through the use of conceptual analysis and thematic analysis, which are methods under the umbrella of textual analysis. As a philosophical study, the use of logical argumentation is inevitable. Likewise, ethical analysis was used, for which reason this study registers as a philosophico-ethical study, in contrast to other studies that employ ethical analysis beyond the criteria of philosophical ethics. The use of textual analysis in my study presupposed that there is a source text to which both the conceptual and thematic analysis were applied. This source text is the 1986 Catholic Pastoral Letter on the Pastoral Care of Homosexuals, abbreviated as 1986 CPL. The 1986 CPL is also famous for other names, for which it is alternatively called Homosexualitatis Problema, the Halloween Letter, the Ratzinger Letter, or the Objective Disorder Letter. This church document was issued by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, or CDF, which is the Vatican's doctrinal watchdog. It was signed by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later known as Pope Benedict XVI, and approved by Pope John Paul II. The letter was sent to all the Catholic bishops around the world on October 31 of 1986. Results of the conceptual analysis was tabulated to show the list of the corpus definitions of homosexuality drawn from the 1986 CPL. Further results using conceptual analysis to process the corpus definitions into thematic clusters of conceptual dimensions were also tabulated. Results of the thematic analysis revealing the list of initial codes that correspond to specific reasons for the pastoral care of homosexuals that were drawn from a rereading of the 1986 CPL were also tabulated. This screen shows the tabulated results of the thematic analysis revealing the final themes that correspond to the moral imperatives of the pastoral care for homosexuals that were explicated from a rereading of the initial codes. In defending the thesis of the study, two major arguments were offered based on the prior results of textual analysis. The first is the argument from the Catholic conceptual definition of homosexuality, which offers a total of 10 sub-inferences. The second is the argument from the moral imperatives of the Catholic pastoral care of homosexuals, which offers 2 sub-inferences. Based on this study's ethical analysis, undertones of ethical pessimism are detected in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic gender pastoral model, due to its morally proscriptive framework. 13 sub-inferences were offered to substantiate this study's claim. From the results and findings of my study, I drew the following conclusions. The 1986 CPL offers multiple conceptual definitions of homosexuality, thereby lending a comprehensive grasp of the concept of homosexuality. However, this finding seems challenged against a backdrop of scholarly literature asserting that the Church has a rather limited understanding of human sexuality. All the conceptual definitions register only under 4 thematic frames, which means that the Church's definition of homosexuality is only anchored on, number 1, how it relates to human nature, number 2, what it is as a human orientation, number 3, its implications to interpersonal relationship, and number 4, its moral qualification. The Church heavily anchors its concept of homosexuality as a type of human orientation and its moral qualification. The 1986 CPL contains a random listing of several specific reasons related to the conduct of a pastoral care for homosexuals. The justifications are grounded on, number 1, why the pastoral care is necessary, and number 2, what approach is appropriate in executing the pastoral care. Explicating from the 1986 CPL the moral imperatives that justify the Catholic gender pastoral care, this study found that the moral imperatives are focused on, number 1, the objective significance of pastoral care of homosexuals, number 2, the homosexuals' personal interests, number 3, conditions and strategies to carry out the pastoral care. Concern over the personal interest of homosexual persons commands the strongest moral imperative as to why the Church finds the necessity to conduct its gender pastoral care. This is whether or not the concerned homosexual duly recognizes them as his or her valid personal interest. This study offered several arguments to defend its thesis that proscriptive morality informs the Catholic pastoral approach to gender. Moreover, this proscriptive moral framework informs both the Church's conceptualization of homosexuality and its recommended moral imperatives for the pastoral care of homosexuals. Findings of my study imply that a proscriptive moral framework should not be adopted as a pastoral approach for homosexuals or even as a framework for LGBT care programs in schools or other institutions. To mention a few details of this implication, the gender pastoral approach offered by the 1986 Catholic Pastoral Letter is psychologically harmful, experientially invalidating, and theologically selective. It undermines the very purpose of pastoral care. It deprives homosexuals the opportunity to achieve genuine ethical flourishing, framed as a journey toward greater love and fulfillment, not as a permanent state of denial and loss. It denies LGBT individuals the possibility of finding fulfillment and spiritual growth in a loving, committed same-sex partnership. The moral validity of a relationship should be based on the quality of love and commitment rather than the gender of the partners. It causes LGBT individuals to internalize negative beliefs about their sexual orientation, leading to self-hatred, low self-esteem, shame, guilt, anxiety, and social isolation. It dismisses the lived experiences and testimonies of LGBT people of faith. This invalidates their authentic emotional realities. It inculcates the thought that the biological and procreative dimensions of sex is of primary importance at the expense of higher moral, personal, and spiritual goals. It fails to acknowledge that loving same-sex relationships can embody principles of justice, commitment, and mutual love. And finally, it offers only a conditional form of acceptance to LGBT individuals wherein they are accepted as people, but only if they suppress a core aspect of their identity and deny themselves a loving partnership. In view of my study's recommendations for practical application, I will only mention a few of them. This study calls for reformation in the Catholic Church's gender pastoral approach, with the realization that using a proscriptive moral framework is ethically unsound and harmful, which defeats the very purpose of pastoral care. This enduring framework is codified in the 1986 Catholic Pastoral Letter on the Pastoral Care of Homosexual Persons. Guidelines offered in this church document are not useful in promoting genuine spirituality among homosexuals. In reforming the framework of its gender pastoral approach, it is recommended for the Church to revisit its understanding of the natural law, to place less emphasis on biological functions and more on personal and relational goods such as justice, love, and consent. The core of the prescriptive framework of the Church's gender pastoral care program is based on its interpretation of natural law, which views homosexual acts as intrinsically disordered because they are not open to procreation. Resource persons in schools and other institutions should adopt caring measures for homosexual individuals that move away from prescriptive morality and focus on support and inclusion. The counselor's role is to offer support, not to attempt to change a student's sexual orientation or identity. Efforts to change a person's sexual orientation are recognized as harmful by professional counseling associations. In view of my study's recommendations for future researchers can examine developmental shifts in church moral teachings on gender to see if it genuinely incorporates listening to the lived experiences of LGBT people, and to check for substantive shift towards a more ethically inclusive stance, or is it simply a more compassionate way of upholding the church's already existing exclusionary dogma? Showing in these slides an overview of my literature citations that served as references of my study. In closing my presentation, I express my deep gratitude to good friends who offered financial sponsorship in support to the broad dissemination and public presentation of this research. Of course, my impetus and passion to develop this research owes from the inspiring struggles and experiences of persons in the LGBT community where I also belong. Thank you very much for listening.